Hey, welcome to the Push Pull Sales and Marketing Podcast. I'm Marcello.
And I'm Sherry, and each episode we provide you with sales and marketing strategies that you can implement immediately into your own business. Today we're going to be talking about motivation and mindset, but along those lines, we want to encourage you to check out former guest Anthony Iannarino's book. He was interviewed by Marcello in episode 33 of the podcast, and they went into some details about the book and what's the word I'm looking for? Not the background, but the strategies and
So the reason why we actually chose him for this particular resource is because his book talks about mindset more than anything else, actually, versus skill set. So his book, The Only Sales Guide You Ever Need, talks a lot more about the mindset part and not so much the actual skill set. So with that being said,
so you can listen to that episode if you'd like to get a better idea of where Anthony is coming from. But you can also use our affiliate link, which is pushpullsales.com/onlysalesguide, all just smushed together. That'll take you through our Amazon affiliate link, and you can grab his book there.
Helps him, helps the show.
Yep.
Awesome. So pretty much I'm going to change things up a little bit. So before I dive into right away in terms of, some mindset stuff and some practical things you can actually use, I want to say a quote, and I'm going to ask you to guess which salesman or sales guru actually said it. Okay?
Can it be multiple choice?
No. Okay. So, pre-sale. Take this time to get your mind and body ready for the fight of its life, because sales is a brutal street fight. But price points will be your brass knuckles, and customer service, when backed in a corner, might just be your Molotov cocktail.
I think that's a little dramatic.
So get focused. Or no, he didn't say, it's a he. I'll lay that in. He says get focused.
I need a couple choices.
No, if I give you the choice, it was going to be pretty obvious.
Tom Hopkins.
Dwight Schrute.
That's a trick question.
All right, and the reason why I brought that one up too is that a lot of times when it comes to hiring salespeople and having salespeople in place, and I'll admit this myself, people will look for like a former athlete or for like someone who's very, very competitive, right? So you kind of get into sales thinking like, well, I'm a very competitive person and I can make a lot of money. So people will get into sales for that reason. So I'm very competitive, and I like to stack rankings and I like all that. The problem with having that mindset and having like this like do or die, it's me or you, or thinking that you have a sort of like zero sum game is, it's going to be a lot harder to kind of close business. So if you kind of backtrack, so what are some things that you can do to kind of get ready so that way your customers is a lot more receptive? Because it's not like, if me and Sherry, if we get in some kind of, buyer-seller relationship, it's not like I win and she loses, right?
Right.
And again, and that's one thing Anthony Iannarino talks about in terms of his book and also in our podcast too, when you're negotiating things like price and programs and options and all that good stuff. It's more about what outcome do you want as the customer, and how can I help you? And how can I help you get there? So again, in terms of getting ready for an actual sales appointment, I'll kind of run you through some mistakes that I used to make personally, and some better ways and also some better tactics. So
you're talking mindset?
I'm going to talk mindset. Yep. And we'll also talk about motivation as well. And for the motivation, it's more along the lines of an individual motivation, but also also what some managers can do. So I also have made that mistake as well in terms of overlooking the actual motivation side for my own salespeople in the past. So one, in terms of the actual like mindset and what you should do and how you should plan and how you should like actually go about your actual sales, like pre-call planning, so to speak. So if you look, and another funny clip, when we should probably link it in the show notes. You have that episode where Jim and Dwight they're going on a sales call. And Jim gets out of the car and he says, can you give me the keys? He's like, are you still doing that? So then he locks the car, he starts the car, he starts playing Kickstart My Heart, starts, getting all fired up and getting ready to go. And a lot of sales.
Is that what it is? Kickstart My Heart?
It is Kickstart My Heart. Yeah. And he's, he starts punching the back of the car seat, so he starts going into it, right? He gets really, really excited, for some people, I think, I used to listen to, before I would go on sell windows and stuff like that, I'd listen to like, Black and White by like Static X, which is like a very like hardcore, and it's a very, very intense song. So what I did was I took a lot of the things that I used to do to get warmed up for wrestling, and I try to apply that into sales. Now, kind of looking back on things too, like maybe getting ready and getting better for wrestling, getting prepped, I could have done a lot of things better in that regard too. Because sometimes it's if you overhype things up, it's going to be a lot harder. So if you put extra pressure on yourself and you overhype things up, you're already making it harder on yourself. When you take sales into account, it's not like, all right, I'm just going to give like the best presentation, I'm going to run through it. No, then you're going to forget about the customer. And at the end of the day, it is all about the customer.
Right. You don't want to just go in so amped up. I think we've all been sitting down for those presentations, whether it's in the boardroom or whether it's like at a conference, where you can just tell that like the person's there to say what they plan to say, and they're not taking in anything. They're not taking in the temperature of the room. They're not going to take in any feedback. They're not even, considering what you need. They're on a mission, which is tough if you're going into it, especially if you're newer at it or you're nervous or you feel like you have to hype yourself up. I totally understand how you can get into that space where it's a one-way street.
100%. So some things you can do to kind of alleviate some of those like sales jitters, especially if you are just getting started off, or even if you've been doing this thing for a while now, and you just want to perform at your best and you want to give the actual best presentations. So a lot of this stuff, and it actually applies, in some of the similar, I'd say, philosophies that are also being taught by my buddies over at Wrestling Mindset. So when it comes to performing well, you don't want to think about the last sale that you messed up. Okay. You also don't want to go into a presentation with that whole like, all right, well, I have to make this sale. And a lot of managers will also make that mistake too. They'll be like, look, you haven't gotten any sales, like what's going on here? You need to make this. Like, do you want to pay the rent? Like, what are you doing? So they'll actually put extra pressure on people, especially very tough when you have some people who are 100% straight commission, 1099 salespeople. So rather than try to put extra pressure on yourself, like I have to have this, or like I have to make this sale, or I haven't made a sale in a while, or what's going on, when you start doubting yourself, you want to actually do the opposite. So you want to break it down in terms of the process. So one, in terms of peak performance, most people will believe like they are able to sell and they are able to do well based off of their own past experience, right? And sometimes it's very easy when you get into a slump to kind of forget about that. If you've missed like 4 or 5 sales straight, you're like, oh, I'm not good at this. So what you want to do basically is just visualize, a previous presentation that you had done very well, that the customer was very, very responsive. Maybe you want to go back and look through some of your testimonial letters, or maybe look through some of your own trainings if you've recorded yourself in the past and how you did those presentations. Having that ready to go is going to help you out a lot more than just going in there and just being like, all right, well, I'm just going to go through this, and I really, really need this sale.
Well, what about the aspect of just doing it more as well? I know it's not always a possibility. Sometimes there's a higher pressure situation that you have to do, but maybe if that's on the horizon, trying to get in either role play experiences or real experiences where the stakes aren't so high, and practice it before you get to that bigger close.
I was going to come to that too. So yeah, you have a good point too. So if you have a larger meeting, or you have a larger presentation, or maybe it's been a while since you've had an actual successful sales call, go ahead and grab a coworker or grab, a manager, grab someone who you trust. And again, someone who's going to be supportive and someone who's going to be able to help you out and is going to give you good feedback, and that you're going to take it well. Because the worst thing you can do is go ahead and get ready for a meeting, and go ahead and kind of do some prep work with somebody, and you kind of run through all the scenarios, and the person isn't being helpful at all. They're like, oh man, you're screwed. Or
that you don't usually respond to them well. Like if you kind of have the right relationship with that person too. You have to trust that their feedback is is honest and one way or the other, not too positive, not too critical. But and that you have the kind of relationship where you can do your thing. I mean, maybe it's not going to your manager if you're nervous about your manager. Maybe it's going to somebody else first.
Yeah, I mean, you and one thing too, and we're going to cover this in another podcast, is you don't want to do all this stuff alone. So if you've been doing sales for a while or you're just getting started off, either way, there are people that know more than you, or there are people that might have a different idea or might have something different that you can use in your presentation or that can help you out. Yeah. So again, you're 100% right. So run through those scenarios and run through, again, not the actual necessarily like close or how you're going to do it. I mean, you do want to practice that a little bit, but really you want to focus more on the questions that you're going to ask and what kind of information you want from the customer and how you're going to get that from the customer. So if you're looking at a typical like one call close or something like that, you want to run through those questions. And if you have more of a continuous sales cycle, you want to do a little bit more in the actual pre-call planning. So in terms of that mindset, what we talk about in pre-call planning, it's a matter of, all right, what did you discuss with the client last time? What was the outcome or what was the next steps for you and what was the next steps for the client? And what kind of questions basically, and how can you word it maybe to possibly move the sale forward? Or if you've been in a situation where you're with the customer and you've already asked them for the business and you're meeting with them again and you're like, all right, well, I've already asked them for the business. I don't have the business now. Like, how can I get my point across maybe in a different way? So in terms of that mindset, it's not like, again, change it from like, all right, well, I'm going in a battle. It's him or her versus me or whatever. No, you want to be there with, all right, how can I ask a question that's going to get the customer kind of understand, my actual viewpoint.
Well, and that's where I wanted to, when we were talking about practicing a little bit too, just mention like the more that you go over it, whether it's in your own head, whether it's out loud to yourself, whether it's to other people, that those questions become second nature instead of worrying that you're going to forget to ask a key question or you're going to forget to hit on a key topic. The more you practice it, that becomes second nature so that you can listen better when you're there.
Yeah, and 100%. The more you practice it, and you don't got to like overthink about it too. You're like, all right, if he says this, I do want to go into a little bit more about that actual topic. And likewise, I mean, unlike if you're a wrestler, if you're a boxer, if you're a football player, a football player is a little bit easier because you can have your whole playbook with you on your little whatever. What do they call that? Arm pad. Like when the quarterback, when he's got the whole he's got the whole cheat sheet on his I think it's called arm guard, something like that. I'm sure
everybody knows except for us.
Everybody knows at the moment except for us. But for a wrestling match or for boxing, like you can't be like, all right, well, let me write in the back of my hand. Well, if he does a crossface, I'm going to look away, or if he throws a half, I'm going to look away, or something like that. Bad analogy. But regardless, in a sales meeting, you can bring your notes. You can bring what kind of questions you do want to ask the client. So really quickly, in terms of just kind of wrapping up, change your mindset from a more of an adversarial thing and think more how you can help the customer in terms of getting your energy levels up. And this is a part of motivation. That part is very important unless it is to the point where you're going to scare people away. And you don't want to be that, what was it, like crazy, whatever. He's giving away what was that guy? It was like, remember
the ShamWow guy?
Well, ShamWow guy. Mean? Yeah, no, it was like I forget, like these deals are crazy or something like that.
Oh, right. The numbers guy with like the question marks all over him. That was even a different guy, but you get the picture. We all know the as seen on TV guys or the motivational Chris Farley motivational speaker kind of guys.
Exactly.
That you're more worried that they're gonna break your table than actually give you anything of value.
Yeah. So in terms of that, and it goes both ways too. So if you think about it, and my buddy Jeannie covered on one of his Mindset Mondays, if you're a person that already is a very, very high energy level, and also Tom Hopkins covered that too. So you have the interesting extrovert, okay, you might want to get more toward the middle. So if you're really, really amped up all the time, you might want to bring the energy level down a little bit.
Especially when like the nerves or adrenaline kick in, it automatically takes you up a notch. And if you're already at the higher end of the spectrum, you need to work on having those nerves center you and calm you versus give you an extra boost.
Exactly. And then opposite, if you're
like me,
if you're more of an introvert, you might need to amp up the actual levels. You might need to bring up the energy level a little bit more. So you had what Tom Hopkins called the interested introvert. Mm-hmm. But in terms of managing with all like those like nerves and kind of those butterflies and having that in place, and we talk about this with a lot of the kids who we work with on wrestling mindset. When you have nerves and you're overthinking and you're not really and it's not really productive, what's happening is you're overloading your brain. It's the same thing if you have like a really difficult, project or assignment, you're working on like a million different things, afterward, it's very, very hard for you to do anything else. So if you've overplanned for this meeting and you've done everything and you try to cram it in a short period of time and you feel like you're very, very nervous and stuff like that, it's harder to go out and perform well and do a good presentation because when your brain's tired, it takes the path of least resistance that it normally shuts down. It goes back into old habits. Now, some salespeople will say like, no, I've always done this. I've always played like the whole like kickstart my heart. And this is part of like my actual routine. And this has worked for me. Why would I change that for you?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with amp up music, especially if you need it to I don't think there's anything wrong with,
well, I want you to visualize Dwight Schrute. I want you to visualize him and think about him in the real world.
It's a whole different thing. But for me, okay, so maybe like the introverted
for you, it might make sense.
People need that, play an amp up song before they go out.
But you might need that.
Don't.
No, anymore. No, and the reason why too is you might need that. And for me, like I think of like if I listen to that, I might think like a more like adversarial thing, and I might think like, all right, it is that whole zero sum game. Versus when I'm in a sales meeting or anything like that, we go back to pretty much sales basics. People do business with people who they know, people who they like, and people who they trust.
Right.
And if I'm in this like amped up and I'm like in battle mode, you're not going to like me as much. Right. If I'm like more like, if I'm just trying to win each argument versus trying to really understand and get that empathy across.
Yeah.
Okay. So, it's
just about where your baseline needs to be. I don't think.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is for the most part, a lot of salespeople I think are on the opposite end.
Yeah.
They are typically extroverted and they are probably maybe amping themselves up too much. And then some of the introverted people are not thinking about this actual aspect about their energy level. As Sherry's.
I'm yawning.
She's yawning as I'm talking about energy levels. It's been a
rough week, guys. We had the stomach bug go through the whole house. I had surgery 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
So I think he picked mindset and motivation because I have zero of it right now.
Exactly. I'm trying to help.
He's trying. I think you need to play me some amp up music so that I can fall asleep on the microphone.
I'm not sure if NBC will have, but I think we can link to a short clip of that video, Kickstart My Heart.
On the podcast?
Oh no, on the website. You can watch it later.
Oh yeah, like a YouTube link or something.
Exactly. But so talking about motivation, and it's funny too. So as a manager, and this is something I will admit, I probably should have done a better job in that regard, especially with younger salespeople and people who haven't been doing it as long, or people who haven't probably doing what you're doing right now, reached out to, a podcast or reached out, and read a book or listened to an audiobook or anything like that. So people that weren't necessarily self-motivated, let's say.
In your defense, I think you would have done a better job if focusing on motivating them if you weren't also in charge of a huge amount of responsibility for your own sales goals.
Yeah.
If you were only a manager, I think you would have done, because you said you didn't do the best job of motivating your sales reps.
Correct.
I'm just trying to give you the credit where credit's due, that you had a lot of other things on your plate as well.
Sure. But again, I'm trying to be open with our listeners here. And the reason why is that, for the most part, I didn't necessarily like need that. I never needed like an extra like pep
Right.
talk or anything
You don't
like that.
ever need any external motivation.
Exactly. So for me,
To a fault sometimes, where I have to be like, no, you say no to that. No, you don't need to be up till midnight working on XYZ. No, you don't need to research another territory.
yeah, you're telling me to not be fanatical on it, and it's definitely hard for me. So again, Sherry helps, and that's why we have this in terms of push pulls. Like Sherry helps bring me to the middle. One person pushes, one person pulls, and eventually we're going to end up in that. We're going to end up in the center. But yeah, so as I was saying, I probably could have done a better job with this. And Sherry is right. I did have a lot of other responsibilities when I was managing other people, but in that environment too, pretty much what had happened is and that was something where I almost had an actual I had a distaste for the whole like rah rah, like let's go, and the reason why is because thinking about it now, I know a lot of my competitors that pretty much didn't do a good job in terms of the customer service or in terms of the actual sales process and in terms of
knowing the product or knowing what you offer, knowing the services.
Correct. So what
you focused a lot on like, let's make sure we actually know how to help the customer and aren't just BSing our way through this.
Exactly. So, but in the same token, by focusing so much on what we were really good at and focusing on, getting the sales in terms of getting the sales reps in terms of the skill set and not so much on the mindset part. There was definitely situations, especially with some younger and some millennial sales reps where it didn't work out with them too. And the reason why is just thinking back to like I had in my head, well, these other organizations, all they do the whole like rah rah, whatever, like let's get up and go and get everybody motivated. And then, they're actually selling a very inferior product. So in terms of just advice in general, you can not like somebody, or you can not like a sort of idea, or you can, I don't even want to say like politics or anything like that. Like, if you're a Democrat and you believe in mostly Democratic policies, you can admit that, that one Republican idea I like, or that Republican idea I like, and vice versa. If you're a Republican and there's a Democratic idea, you might be able to like that. The same exact thing is true in terms of getting ideas in terms of your sales process. There might be a sales rep in your organization who you don't like, but if he's doing better than you, maybe there's one or two things that you can copy off of that. So one thing I should have done in terms of copying off of some of what our competitors did was for the people that do have low energy levels. So if you're a manager, keep that in mind. Those like Monday, let's go ahead and get motivated things. Like it might not make a difference for everybody. But, for a handful of salespeople, it probably is going to make the difference, because for some people, actually getting started, it's very, very hard in terms of keeping motivated. And this goes back to getting ready for the actual sales meeting itself. You want to celebrate past successes, and it's not enough, to do that like once in a while. You have to do it often, and you also have to do it immediately. And this is another thing too that I also probably could have done a little bit better, was when somebody did well, was to motivate them right away and to acknowledge that right away versus like wait until, and this is probably because, I think it was part of the company culture at the time too, because Sherry's, Sherry is she is quietly acknowledging, because I believe at one point I said, well, one flower, it isn't like the meaning of spring or something like that, which basically, you do want to say like, yeah, you did a good job. You don't want to rest on your laurels, but in the same token too, if somebody does something good and, you kind of put them down at that point, you're not really going to help them out. So rather than take things through a negative approach, you want to be a lot more positive. So in terms of just getting people motivated, some small things you can do. Okay. One is you want to be open and transparent about the numbers from the beginning and continually update no matter what happens. So for example, if you have 10 salespeople and, you always celebrate like, hey, this week, this person had the very best week, and you post the numbers, post that all the time. What you don't want to do as a sales manager is you don't want to like release the numbers and keep things like hidden from everybody until the very end. So the sales rep doesn't know like if they're even doing good or like where they actually stack rank and stuff like that. Cause that's probably like one of the most, I think, demotivating things possible is to be doing your job, to be doing that consistently.
Well, especially when your payment is dependent on how well you're doing. Like if you're working on commissions, either partially or fully, you need to know where you're standing. You need to know how you're progressing. I think a lot of people go into sales because they want to be in charge of their own destiny and they want to know where they're at. They want to have those achievements and numbers to look to. It's very different than working at a salaried position where you don't need the numbers necessarily there because it doesn't affect things as much.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a 100% salaried position, or if you're doing something, let's just say unrelated, like I don't know, like if you're like a banker and you don't have any sort of additional, except for Wells Fargo, and you don't have any sort of additional incentive to to kind of go the extra mile or kind of do anything other than an actual like raise or something like that. Yeah, 100%. But in terms of keeping people motivated, there's nothing more demotivating at that point to think that you're doing a good job. And then a manager comes in and be like, your work isn't good. Like what are you actually doing? So the feedback, it needs to be obviously constructive, and it needs to be consistent in terms of intervals, like when you give feedback and who you actually give feedback to, in terms of spending extra time with actual salespeople. And this is a trap that I feel like, again, in terms of getting the actual, balance, we talk about getting to the center. If you listen to Brian Tracy, he talks about spending your time with salespeople. He talks about, again, you want to reward your sales reps that are doing good with more of your time. So those are the ones that you actually want to take out to lunch, or maybe like spend a little bit of extra time with them.
Right. Instead of the always annoying, like squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of phenomenon that just drives people crazy, and you're going to lose your best people to someone that's going to actually appreciate them.
Exactly. But in the same token, you also don't want to neglect salespeople that, maybe it's just like one or two small changes, and maybe like they would need some additional coaching, or maybe pointed to some additional resource. So what Brian Tracy suggested was basically, here's a book, here's an audiobook. I'm going to get you all the support you need. But basically, I'm not going to spend more of my, one-on-one time. Rather, I like to reward top performers.
I think that's a good philosophy. Here's a lot of times you have books that help get you to a certain point, or e-courses, or listen to this podcast, or go take this webinar, or whatever. But like you said, it's not that personalized one-on-one. I don't want to say hand-holding, but support network.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other thing is you need to weed out negativity in your group right away. So in a previous podcast, we talked about the challenger saying, talk about the lone wolf, somebody who isn't following protocol and someone who isn't following the rules. So another thing that can really erode motivation, really erode a work environment, is when people know this person here did this wrong and they got fired for it, but this person did the exact same thing and they didn't get fired for it, So you don't want to create that environment as you have an old boys club, or oh, well, if I can do this or whatever. So again, in terms of being consistent across the board, whatever your expectations are for your people, go ahead and actually enforce it. So you have to create a culture. So if you want to have a high energy, you want to have a high motivation environment, everybody on the team needs to be on board, and how you interact with each and every person will actually make a difference, and how you even introduce other people. I'll kind of give you an example, and this is unrelated to sales. I was at one of my many meetings for something different. And at the meeting, one person basically I kind of did the normal joke. There's one person who's a little bit more, how should I say, long-winded. And every time this person gets introduced, and here's going to be.
This was one of the community meetings, right? Local here?
Yes. And here's and now we're going to have a word from blah, blah, blah. And I hope he'll keep it brief, or now we're going to have a brief word from, and that person came out and was like, look, you cannot do that because it minimizes what I'm about to say. And he had at it. And you know what? He was right. And the same thing holds true too. Like if you're going to like introduce like someone as a sales trainer, you're going to like talk up or you're going to talk down to, to a different sales rep in front of somebody else. That makes a huge difference. So if you're positive about everybody and you're out and open in the public, like be like, look,
well, you have someone riding along with you and they're like, they're going to try to present this today. We'll see how they do, or we'll see how it goes, instead of just being like,
oh, exactly. Or if you ask your salespeople, like, hey, can you tell me like what do you actually feel about this person here? If that person, you feel like, oh, well, this person's terrible, blah, blah, blah. And then, you ask them about someone else, like, oh, that person's terrible and blah, blah, blah. Like if you have like a negative person like on your group, you want to think about that too, like how you're going to manage that. Because sometimes you have people that they're just miserable people.
I was talking about like when you introduce somebody.
What do you mean?
To a client. Like if you walk in with somebody you're training or somebody beneath you.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about like you're in the field and you're with like a coworker and they're asking about a different coworker.
You're going into like a pitch or something and you're saying to the person you're presenting to, like, I'm gonna let the new guy try this out, or like you have to be careful with how you're presenting them. Oh. Because it matters to the client, but it also really matters to the sales rep.
Oh, yeah, 100% too. So yeah, it'll make it different for the sales rep too, because you're going to do that for two reasons. 100%, absolutely. So one of the reasons, energy level just came up there a little bit. I kind of picked it up a little bit. I'm excited about that one. In terms of your presentation too, you want to have that up a little bit if you feel like you're down, and likewise if you're too excited, you got to bring the levels down a little bit. Yeah. So for the sales rep, it reaffirms to them and it makes them believe it more too. Like be like, hey, you want to talk to Joey here. I'm going to let him do all the talking today. Joey does a phenomenal job, and he's really an expert when it comes to really complex commercial insurance situations, right? So then you've just pumped up Joey, and Joey feels a lot better. And then likewise, the actual, and if you've read the book Influenced by Robert Cialdini, the customer is going to believe that too, even if they know that you have an incentive to kind of hype someone up. Or it's the same way and say, you know what, you should talk to Mary. Mary is an expert on booking flights from Europe to wherever and getting the best destinations possible, or something like that, even if you have that actual incentive. So to kind of wrap things up a little bit, and I did want to keep this one short in terms of getting...
Your wife is falling asleep.
Exactly. In terms of getting the right mindset right before you actually go into right until you go into an actual sales meeting. Some things you want to do. So one, take out the whole adversarial, like zero-sum game mindset right there. Throw that out the window. It's not a battle or anything like that. If you do need to get yourself pumped up, think about energy level, not like angry, more like excited at that point. Okay. If you're someone who already is a little bit too excited, you might want to bring those levels down a little bit. If you are dealing with nerves and in the beginning, it's definitely harder if you're in like a high pressure situation, or you're like, oh man, like, yeah, I have like...
You haven't had your first sale yet. Every situation feels like a high pressure situation.
Oh yeah, exactly. And we talked about this many times before. If you need it and the customer can sense it, those are the deals you aren't going to make. And you can, and I've listened, to some presentations and I'm like, you can tell that person's desperate. You can tell that person's desperate. And I don't think I've ever spent money because I thought the salesperson was desperate. Mm-hmm. So kind of that same thing. So how to deal with those nerves and how to get that in place again, and having the right mindset. And this is stealing some of the philosophy of wrestling mindset. You want to fall back on all the training that you've done, and really have that as a sort of like, confidence booster in terms of just knowing like, hey, you know what, I've had some of the best training, or I've been in sales for years now, or I've done this plenty of times before. And this would apply too if you're switching industries, because sometimes you might get a little bit nervous too, like, oh, I've done inside sales before, but I've never done outside sales before, or I've done like retail, but I've never done a deal this big before. If you're able to close a small deal, you're able to close a big deal. Because if you follow the process, everything is going to be 100% the same, in terms of, understanding customer needs, and presenting the solution the right way, answering objections. A lot of the basics, it doesn't really go away. And Tom Hopkins talked about that, in terms of sales. It's not that different from golf. You have a couple basic elements in terms of an actual golf swing. Some people might do some things differently, but the actual basics are more or less the same. So again, fall back in terms of your training, and also remember the times when you did very well. Don't overthink about all the negative things that possibly could happen. You want to focus on the positives, and in terms of studies and psychology and peak performance, people do better when they focus on what they're good at than versus focusing on what they're not good at. In terms of an actual quote, and I'm going to see if Sherry can guess this one too.
Jim Halpert.
Whenever I'm about to do something, I think, would an idiot do that?
Is that Dwight as well?
Yes. So for that quote, it is also coming from Dwight Schrute. So kind of the same thing too. Like, it seems like it's something that would be fairly common sense. Like, why would I focus on the negatives? Like, why wouldn't I just focus on what I'm really good at? In terms of motivation and keeping your sales reps, like ready to go and keeping them consistent. One, you want to be open and transparent about the numbers, and you want to give them out at regular intervals, and you want to always celebrate when somebody does well. And even on small things too, because at that point, when you are complimenting people and you are creating that culture, people are going to feel a lot better about their job and a lot better about what they're doing when they do have a hard day. Because sometimes, you can have a sales rep and the sales rep could be doing every single thing right, but, for some reason or another, maybe they're out prospecting one day and, none of the prospects are really a good fit for their solution, Mm-hmm. So it's very easy to get kind of disheartening and be like, well, I feel like I didn't have like anything productive that I actually did today. So when you do have all those small wins, it definitely helps. You don't want to assume that, the way to motivate one person is going to be the same way to motivate another person. So in that example, when I had a couple younger sales reps, I pretty much didn't spend as much time in terms of like kind of getting them pumped up a little bit and getting them motivated in the morning, because I didn't really ever need that. Like when people would say like, oh, it's Friday, I can't wait for the weekend and stuff like that. I'm like, I'm excited for Monday. I like the opportunity to work, or like pretty much I'd say I don't want to hear you say that on the phone in front of customers. It sounds bad pretty much. Right. So on that motivation side, you want to be consistent. You want to be open and transparent with the numbers. And again, a lot of times people say, oh, you can just give them more money. Sometimes just time with them or just group acknowledgement is very big. Small tokens of appreciation can go a really, really long way. So it could be something small like a small contest in terms of, all right, whoever books the most appointments for next week, I'm going to give like a, $20 Starbucks gift card, or even a $5 Starbucks gift card. They don't have to be like huge and lavish things, or it could be like a parking space, or it could be, again, sales managers can get fairly creative with that. But again, you want to reward small wins as much as you would reward big wins. In terms of if you need to get motivated, you need to get pumped up for a larger, sales meeting or sales presentation. Think about, let's just say, what are you really working for in terms of, your family, your vacation, or whatever you have prepped. Whatever you're thinking about versus like an actual like monetary thing. Like, all right, well, if I hit my number, I'm going to make $100,000. Well, why are you working for that? Well, I want to pay off my student loans this year. Okay, having that is going to be a lot easier to keep you motivated and keep you going along versus an actual monetary goal if your why is kind of big enough. And that, I believe, I'm going to steal from E.T. the Hip Hop Preacher. If your why is big enough, you're going to be able to find a way.
Yeah. Well, and that's what Gary Vee talks about all the time too, that everybody's motivation is different. And is it Simon Sinek, or however you say it?
Simon Sinek, yeah. Start with why.
and it's going to change, right now if you're a single guy, your motivation, might just be money and you don't mind doing extra hours. But if you get married, maybe work-life balance comes into play and maybe you care more about vacation time. It's a shifting thing. So it's your role to be able to identify that within yourself. If you have good managers, hopefully they're identifying that as well.
Yeah. So I think that about wraps things up for this week. I'll give Sherry her own little motivating pep talk later. I might pop in Dwight Schrute and Gary Vee combo, something like that.
Or since it's 9:30 p.m., I can just go to bed for the night.
Or that, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you to bensound.com for our intro and outro music. And thanks to you guys for listening. You can tune in next time where we will be tackling another topic. We might have a guest on for the next one in the next week or two.
Yes.
We may have a couple here. Marcel and I get back to the basics, but we'll be sure to interview some more people here in the near future. As always, you can view show notes and resources at pushpullsales.com. You can follow us on Instagram or Twitter at pushpullsales. And you can email us pushpullsales@gmail.com if you have any feedback, questions, if you want to be on the show, if you know someone who should be on the show. And also the affiliate link to Anthony Iannarino's book again, which is The Only Sales Guide You'll Ever Need, is the name of the book, is pushpullsales.com/onlysalesguide. Did you look like you had something else to add?
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to say is now, if you have any other good Dwight Schrute quotes or anything like that, if you want to tweet us at pushpullsales.com, or you can tweet us at pushpullsales, or email us pushpullsales@gmail.com, and maybe next time we can play a rousing round of who said it, Tom Hopkins or Dwight Schrute.
All right, we'll talk to you guys later.
All right, see ya.